This is Dr. Nick Hayward of Medical Reel. Welcome to COVID-19 Long Haul Stories. Today we have Celeste's story. I'd like to hand over to Celeste. Perhaps you could kindly please tell us a little bit about yourself and who you are and how you were back in January before COVID-19 even came along.
Sure. So, like I said, Nick said, my name is Celeste Vitale, and I live in Staten Island, New York. And I contracted COVID on, I believe, March 15th. And I really became sick on March 18th. Before this, a 47-year-old kindergarten teacher. I also tutor some children on the side. I have a family, a 17-year-old daughter and a husband. And before COVID, I was hardly ever home. I would come, go to school in the morning, come home, tutor, cook dinner, take care of my family, run my daughter to dance. She dances in a different borough, so we were traveling a lot. On the weekends, I would do my housekeeping, maybe go out a little bit. But then my life suddenly changed
My
once
goodness.
I had COVID.
So thank you very much for that generous introduction and sharing how things were before this all came along. It sounds like you were very, very active, doing a number of different activities. What happened in March time, as I understand? Perhaps you could talk us through that, please.
So I was at work on March 18th, and I woke up feeling my throat was kind of scratchy, but I thought maybe I'm a kindergarten teacher. I was coming down with strep throat, perhaps. I was a little stuffy. Maybe I was getting a cold from the children. I pick up a lot of germs from the kids. But the kids weren't in. The kids weren't in school because in New York, Sunday night, they stopped school. So we were just in for meetings preparing for what they call remote learning. So I woke up that morning and I went into school again. I thought maybe I was coming down with strep throat. I was very stuffy. Maybe I was getting a cold, but I was okay. Like I could definitely work through the day. It was meetings. I was definitely okay. But then 2:00 came and I started to feel different. Like it was the weirdest thing. So I had the chills and then my face was burning. So I was hot and cold at the same time. So I said, let me go to the nurse because if I'm sick, I can't be around my colleagues. So she took my temperature and she said, no, you're fine. You don't have a temperature. I was like, oh, okay, good. I said, but I'm still going to call the doctor and maybe go to the urgent care because we have those in New York, just to see maybe I had strep or coming down with a sinus infection, colds, whatever. By the time I got in my car to go home at 3:00, I was achy from head to toe, but like a different kind of achy than the flu, like a throbbing achy. I got home. On my way home, I called my mom. We live in a 2-family house and we eat dinner together every night. So I told her, I'm going right to my bedroom. I don't feel good. I said, maybe it's strep, maybe it's a sinus infection. I don't feel good. I took my temperature. It was at 102.3 and I got right into bed. And then my husband came home from work and he was like, what's the matter? And I told him I wasn't feeling good. So I was up all night, fever. I had severe nausea. I didn't throw up, but I had severe nausea. I have one of those beds that go up and down. So I sat up all night. And every time I would like move, I would think I saw a bug or something. It was the wildest thing. All night I had a temperature. I was taking Tylenol. And then every morning I have teacher friends in other boroughs. My friend Michelle called and we speak every morning. So she said, what's the matter? You sound horrible. I said, I really don't feel good. I had a fever all night, nauseous, sore throat, pounding headache. She said, I think you have the virus. I said, no way. I said, there's no possible way that I have the virus. So she said, you better call the doctor. So as time went on in the morning, I waited for like 9:00 to call the doctor. And the doctor answered and she said, I'm really tired of these teachers calling. She said, you don't have the virus. I said, I was burning up with a fever all night. I have a very bad sore throat. I said, I don't think it's strep. There's no spots on my tonsils. She says, well, if you want to go for a test, I'll recommend one for you. She says, but I don't think you have it. So, and Staten Island that time, we had to go on a waiting list because it was so new. We had to go on a waiting list to go to the hospital that set up a tent outside. So I put in for it. And about, I think 4 days later, they called me for the test. But that morning, I was really sick. So I started to have like GI symptoms, bad diarrhea. But I knew I had to make it down to get that test. So they swabbed me. They were so nice to me. They put the swab in my nose, very quick. So put it in, and then I just went home. But then when I got home, my stomach started to settle and I started to feel better. So I was like, whoa, you know what? I don't have the virus. I'm starting to feel better. I still had the fever, but my body was feeling better. No, because that night it came back, but more severe. I couldn't get out of bed for, I'm going to say maybe like 2 weeks after that. And in the interim, I tested positive. Called my doctor. What are the steps I'm going to take? She seemed like she didn't want to be bothered with me. So I stayed in bed. I drank a lot. I couldn't eat. I didn't feel like eating, but I drank a lot. Tylenol every 4 to 6 hours. And I stayed in my bedroom.
My goodness. Celeste, this is amazing to hear that this all happened very suddenly for you, and it was obviously a massive change. It sounds like when they tested you the first time, they were very understanding and accommodating. Was that a positive test, that first test?
That was positive, yes. So my first positive test was March. I'm looking at my journal right here, like March 28th was my...
What's really interesting about that is everything you've just described. Clearly, lots of parts of your body were involved, lots of different symptoms, but you didn't actually mention, and maybe I'd like to ask, did you have any breathing problems?
So, Nick, that came after. So about 2 weeks passed, then I had a very bad cough. That was kind of like, I couldn't even catch my breath. And it felt like literally an elephant was sitting right on my chest. And again, I call the doctor. It will pass. Just take the Tylenol. At some points, I felt like I couldn't breathe. At some points, some days I couldn't even open my eyes. I had to call out sick, even though I was doing remote teaching. I was trying to do it, because I would like try to sit myself up, put on a shirt, put some mascara on, be there for the kids. But after that, I would just be, laying down in my bed.
Wow. So it's interesting to see that the timeline for you was very much about some really terrible gastric symptoms initially, lots of fevers, and then it was actually not until 2 weeks later that you had the sort of classic signs that everyone was warning us about back in March time of breathing issues. It sounds like they came a little later for you, but then in fact, for someone of your background, everyone kind of assumes that it's going to be reasonably mild. It sounds like it went on for some time. Tell us a little bit more about the duration of time you were unwell at home.
So I was in my bedroom quarantined for 48 days because I was still, so I would test positive and then wait for wait for the results, and then test positive again, wait for the results, test positive again, wait for the results. But I kept on testing because I still had these symptoms. Some days I didn't think I was going to survive. I would just lay in my bed and I could barely open up my eyes. And a few times I said to my husband, I'll tell you where my life insurance policy is, because I don't think I'm going to make it through the night and I'm not going to the hospital. And he didn't want to bring me to the hospital because in New York, it was a bad scene. Like, he would have to leave me at the door and possibly never see me again.
My word. Okay, Celeste. So let's put this in context. You're at home. You isolated for in what was in total 48 days due to the severity of your symptoms. If you don't mind me asking, what were the symptoms that made you feel like you were really very unwell? Was it the breathing? Was it your tummy? Which bit was kind of telling you that you felt that ill?
It was my breathing. Again, it was like an elephant pressing on my chest. It was this pounding headache. And I get migraines once in a while, but this was worse than a migraine. That it was like just throbbing. My face hurt. My ears felt funny. My throat was so sore. And this continued. This continued and continued. And then during those 48 days, so I had no physical contact with anyone. My husband would come in, take my temperature like through the door with one of those guns, bring in my food. My daughter would not come in my bedroom at all. She would just leave the food by my door when she was home, because she was doing remote learning too. When my husband was at work, someone needed to bring me stuff. Couldn't leave my bedroom. So I was still feeling these symptoms, right? And then finally, I still feeling these symptoms. The doctor recommends that I go for another test. I tested negative. That was my 4th time I tested negative. But then I was still feeling the symptoms. I came out of my room, but I didn't really touch anything. I wore gloves. I put a mask on. And then the next day I got a phone call saying that my once negative was now a positive.
Oh my
and
goodness.
That I needed 2 negatives in a row. So I was back in my room for another 14 days.
Wow. So in this situation, the clinical staff that you had access to were recommending additional testing in a way so that we could hopefully end your isolation period. Was that the reason for the repeat testing?
Yes.
Okay. And on that occasion, everything changed. One moment you must have been feeling elated at the idea of some progress finally, getting closer again to your family, and then suddenly it's all back to the bedroom. And
I just cried.
Yeah, I was going to say it must be difficult. I can't begin to imagine, but could you maybe shed light on sort of what thoughts go through your mind during that 48-day period?
When am I going to get better? I need to hug my daughter. I need to hug my husband. He was sleeping on the couch for 48 days.
I think he deserves a medal, quite frankly. That's incredible. I mean, it's amazing how much your family and the clinical staff you fortunately had access to managed to support you and continue to monitor the situation. But I am curious to know, how that really is. I mean, it's nice to have that resource, but that doesn't make it any easier.
So I forgot to leave out the turning point to this whole thing. So mid-April, I'm going to say, my knee blew up. It was like this big. And I called my doctor and she said, okay, let's feel your leg, see if you maybe have a blood clot. And that didn't sit well with me. And I didn't want to go to the hospital. So I was seeing a while ago an infectious disease doctor. So I decided to call him. And he did video call with me. He looked at my leg and he told me it was from the virus. My body had went into some kind of storm that my immune system stopped fighting, I believe, the virus. And so he prescribed a Z-Pack and colchicine. And he said they were doing a study putting patients on the Z-Pak and the colchicine, and then I would start to feel better in about 2 weeks. And my knee went down back to, normal size, and I did start to feel not myself, but not so sick.
So that doctor sounds like he had some really, or she had some very very helpful advice and guidance there. Did you therefore get enrolled in a clinical trial, or was it just a sort of one-off treatment attempt?
Just a treatment attempt. That's what they were doing. They were trying a few things. And he thought that since I had this swollen knee, that they used this on gout patients for many years, and that he would try it because they were trying it on other patients. Because the problem with this virus, it also affected my joints. So swollen ankles, swollen fingers. My fingers are still swollen. And when I had my appointment 2 weeks ago with the infectious disease doctor, they decided to put me on a anti-inflammatory diet because my fingers, my ankles swell. And it's all from, I never had this before. It's all from the virus from March.
So what you're describing is interesting because we have, as you know, relatively limited understanding of precisely why this virus is causing so much trouble for so many. But what you're describing sounds like your immune system was one of those immune systems that has a very unusual reaction to the virus. And in this case, in your case, it sadly affected many different parts of your body, including your joints. And I think that's going to be a really topical area of research, is to think, how do we understand each individual's immune response to this virus? Because we're seeing responses in many different patients that are quite unique. And we're also seeing some trends as well, the fact that the immune system is so heavily involved. And that's something I hope will be the subject of much more research to come. Can I ask, in your case, did the colchicine treatment help for you?
Yeah, the swelling definitely went down in my knee. My knee was so swollen. And the Z-Pak definitely started to help me feel better, not myself, but made me feel better. I was suffering for a very long time, and I felt like my regular doctor was not helping me. Maybe because they didn't have the information, but why didn't they? And this is my question: why didn't they start me, maybe day 8 or 14 on a Z-Pak and something else, or just give the Z-Pak a try? Why did I have to go so many days feeling so sick with no help? And that morning when she said, well, check for a blood clot, I was like, no, I need some kind of help.
So that's interesting. Even though you had access to testing, and we know lots of patients around the world sadly don't have adequate testing access, even now, all these months later, you found that actually there were many areas of your care where there was either a lack of knowledge or some misunderstandings, and actually it was very difficult to provide you with up-to-speed advice. Would you say that your care was kind of mixed in that way, some good, some not so good?
Yes. So my regular physician that I've been seeing for 20 years was not helpful to me at all. But I should say, strange doctors at the urgent care, who I would see every 2 weeks for a test, were nothing but nice to me. And actually, my 5th test, the nurse who was doing these tests for all these months was like, you gotta have a negative. Please, I'm praying for you. And so those strangers at the urgent care were so good to me. The doctors calling me, do you need anything? How are you feeling? As opposed to my regular physician, who I have a relationship with for 20 years, right? She was no help to me, which is very disappointing.
I think it's hugely disappointing. We often turn to our family medicine practitioners to really lean on them at times where our entire family is affected. But I think what you're describing, if you don't mind me saying, is kind of illustrates how we're sort of learning as we go. And often it's the frontline staff, those staff at the urgent care centre who are seeing these cases day in, day out, at least over the last few months. And of course, they must have seen so many, that they are perhaps in a better position to sort of understand your circumstances than the clinicians who haven't been quite so involved. And I think what you're describing there might possibly be an example of where the urgent care doctors may have some more familiarity with what's happening and with you personally than perhaps, strangely, the physician that's known you for some time. And I think that illustrates how fast this virus has really taken hold across huge swathes of the population. It doesn't matter what your background is or where you're from. It's the urgent care centres that are going to be seeing the patients because it's so spread out in many ways. Okay, well, we were just touching on this idea of a negative test, and it sounds like you wanted or needed to have these negative tests in order to sort of reintegrate with your family. Did that eventually come for you? What's the situation there?
So finally, June 6th. So we're talking March 18th to June 6th. I finally had a negative. And I said to the doctor, I can't do this again. I'm not doing another test again. So he was like, you know what? It's okay. You don't have to. We're learning that you're only contagious for a certain amount of days. So go ahead and enjoy your family. And the following weekend, I had some company over to celebrate Father's Day and to celebrate me being out of my bedroom for so many days.
Well, that's an incredible journey that you had. And I'd like to come back to this topic of how does one manage? I mean, maybe you could share a little more on what you were thinking and feeling during those 48 days. And in particular, sort of maybe from that, you might have learned some things and it may have created some new perspectives that you'd like to share. So, yeah, could you tell us a little more about that, maybe, please?
So I really don't watch a lot of TV. I really don't watch a lot of TV, but in those 48 days, I watched so much TV. I think I watched every movie on Netflix, and I watched tons of movies on demand. I did a lot of FaceTiming with my friends, and so they could see me and I could see them. FaceTiming with my daughter, who was just like in the next room down the hall. FaceTiming my husband, who was downstairs. I did a lot of schoolwork. I learned how to use make videos for my class and my school. So yeah, I started to read a little bit when my head wasn't pounding. So yeah, those were some of the things. It was such a long journey in my bedroom. And then I would say, okay, 2 more weeks and I'll be okay. And then 2 more weeks and okay, all right. So you did 4 weeks already. It's another 2 weeks. So I would like convince myself like it just goes by so fast. And I learned that the days and nights really do go by really fast. Like I think about it now, I'm like, wow, 48 days was a long time, but it did fly by because
That's really interesting, actually, because one might assume that by being very isolated for that duration of time, that one would feel like sort of time almost slows down. But actually, you managed to keep yourself occupied. You managed to find some positivity at times and opportunities. Entertainment, absolutely, often the best medicine, no doubt. And I'm actually relatively surprised to hear that the time, I'm sure at times, passed by very quickly. But let's not forget this is, and I'm sure you've hinted at this throughout, and I want to come back to this concept. This doesn't just affect the individual concerned, and I'm really keen to get a little understanding on how your family, who clearly made enormous adjustments, how things have affected them. Maybe you could share that a little more, please.
So I wasn't able to be a mother to my 17-year-old. Like they are so vulnerable at this age that they need their mother, like to talk to them and to be there for them. She was so scared that something was going to happen to me, and I couldn't hug her. I couldn't have any contact with her. My mom had to do all of the cooking, and she would leave it. So we have this common area. She would leave the food and cook for my family, and then they would eat and then bring it up to me. So it has just it took a toll, like, and not having contact with, like, at a dinner table, because that's what we do every night. We sit at the dinner table, and that's where we have our conversation. We couldn't have that. For 48 days, I couldn't hug my husband, and it was just, I felt my heart would, like, after 2 weeks, like, my heart did feel like it was breaking, like, and I felt like you really do need physical contact. Like, just to touch someone on the back or the hands or the head, you need that, because inside those 48 days, like, I was feeling so lonely. I needed that. I needed to touch someone.
I really respect what you're saying, and for many people around the world, there's been this real separation between people. Thank you for sharing that idea. Actually, there's good evidence to show that it's not just little babies who need to be held. It's very important for everyone of all ages, and to be able to have that close human contact is very central to our physical and mental well-being. And I'm glad you've highlighted that, because that's something that I think has been largely absent in many parts of society recently. And it sounds like you're very family oriented, and to have that disconnection with your family, would that be one of the most difficult things in all of this, or were the symptoms more of a problem for you?
I guess it's equal. So the symptoms some days were so bad. Like I said, I couldn't even open my eyes. The aches were throbbing. And if someone could just, like, hold me or hug me, maybe I could have felt better. So, like, equally, missing the physical contact and suffering the side effects of this virus really did affect me equally, I have to say.
Yeah, that's understandable, and I'm sure the two are kind of linked in a way. One feels better when we're closer to others, I'm sure. Um, let's have a little think about what has been happening more recently. Can you remind me of the date of when you had that negative test, and then perhaps describe how things have been for you since then?
So I tested negative June 6th. What's going on now is that I could feel okay for a couple of days, and then I'll feel like I'm getting sick again. Like, I have a constant cough for 5 months. It comes and goes, like, throughout the day, but it's every day that I'm coughing. I have this sore throat that's never ending for 5 months. It's not red, so they say it's not red. Like, I can't really tell, but it's sore. Headaches come and go a few days a week. The achiness. So yesterday I did my housekeeping. So today my arms are throbbing, my legs are throbbing. So this is something that's been ongoing. In the beginning, it was like 3 times a week that I would feel really sick. Now it's lessening, but the more I do, the more I feel sick. So the old me never stopped running places, doing things, never home. Now I have to clean one bedroom and then sit down for maybe 20 minutes. Clean the bathroom, sit down for another 20 minutes. Unlike the old me, where I used to just, like, run through all the rooms, clean everything, and just fine without taking breaks.
And do you mind me asking, what is it that's promotes your need to stop? Is it your arms and legs? Is it your breathing? Is it your head? Tell us a little bit more about what sort of slows you down.
It's like a weird feeling, like all of a sudden, and I didn't talk much about this, but it's like this exhaustion just hits you. And you get this like weird feeling, like the sore throat becomes worse, and this exhaustion just like it's undescribable, the exhaustion that you just have to sit and close your eyes.
Okay, yeah, that describes that it's kind of your whole body is involved here when you're
Yeah.
trying to continue, it seems. My word. Okay, so something I've been curious about in all of this, if we look kind of at the whole experience for a moment, were you sort of, and you don't have to go into detail, but were you in what people would call a high risk category or anything like that?
No,
And you've
no.
already very beautifully shared with us how you're leading a very active lifestyle, looking after your family, other people's children in the kindergarten, very, very active. And here we are, we're in a situation where even the simplest of tasks at home are still problematic almost 2 months since you've had that negative test, or in fact, more than 2 months now.
Well,
So,
I'm sorry to interrupt you. I just
go
had
ahead.
another negative test because in order to go back to my job at the school, you needed to have a negative test. So I just tested again. This was my seventh nasal swab. So I tested negative again. So I got my two.
My word. Okay, so that extra nasal swab now it gives you the kind of the green light to try and get back to some occupational normality, working back with
Yeah.
the children at the kindergarten. Tell me more about that. How do you feel about going back to your work from before, considering how you're feeling at the moment?
So I'm excited to get started working again. I I'm not scared that I'm going to get it again because right now I do have the antibodies, which are depleting. They are depleting. So in June, my antibodies were 8.8, and now my antibodies are 5.3. So I know that I'm not going to get sick again. So I'm excited to get started. I'm just worried about like not taking care of my family when I get home because I'm going to be on my feet all day. I'm going to be working and bending and talking all day. That when I come home, I'm really going to have to rest a lot more than I ever did.
I respect that, and I guess if you don't mind me saying, sometimes it's good to try these things. You know, try and continue with, your work and other activities, because it's sort of I sort of think of it as rebuilding. One has to rebuild what has changed and changed so dramatically over the last few months as well. Okay, well, this has been absolutely enlightening, and I am very, very grateful for you sharing in so much depth and detail what has been happening. But this is very much your story, and I think a lot of people out there don't fully understand the potential long-term consequences of COVID-19, coronavirus. Um, Maybe you could share some things that you would like others to consider when it comes to the long-term effects of coronavirus.
So, a lot of people think that the virus is not real, and it is indeed real because I'm living it and I'm still being treated. It's a real thing, and you really just need to listen to your body. And when you've done too much, you need to like stop what you're doing and just rest. And then hopefully the next day is going to be better. And that's the advice I would give to anyone who's still suffering from the virus, that you just have to listen to your body and just stop. And that was advice from the infectious disease doctor. He said, if you think you can do that one more mile or that one more block, if you go for a walk, go ahead and do it. But if you can't, then don't push it because the next day it will be worse for you. And so that's the advice I can give. Like, if you think you can, try, but if you can't, don't push it.
Very well described, that balance to consider there. And what about the considerations for you long term? Have the clinicians that you've been seeing, have they got any idea about how your symptoms may change in the future?
There's just, when I go to the post COVID clinic, they tell me that they're learning through me and people like me. So every day that they take that another MRI, and every day that they look at that next cardiogram, they're just learning. They're learning through us, and that's why I was lucky that they took me at the clinic so I could not only get the help that I need, right, but I could help other people through this journey. And and again, this virus is not like a 2-week thing or a 5-day thing like the flu or strep throat where you get better in 3 days. Again, it's 5 months. And that's a really long time to not feel yourself.
I think that's really well said. I would reiterate that this very much is not the flu. This is a virus that, as a clinician myself, I can see from the research literature I've read, that there's a lot left to learn, and it's very different to other viruses out there. I think it's great that you've got access to this clinic. What other support do you have available? Perhaps you could tell us a bit more about this clinic and what other support you might have, because it's important for people to know what might be out there.
So in New York, I was so lucky that every time, except for the first time, I had to wait for the test. Um, every other time, the test was readily available to me. I would just call, make the appointment, and just go and wait outside. No waiting time. They would give me the test and I would go. And then at the clinic, they're so nice. Every time they, check your weight, they check your breathing. Like I said, I'm having trouble passing my pulmonary function test. So they're sending me to their pulmonologist in a couple of weeks so they could see what's going on, why I still have this cough for 5 months. I had an MRI because I'm brain foggy, feeling dizzy. I could swear that something happened with my vision, but my eye doctor doesn't think so. I saw a cardiologist for women, so I get so much support at that clinic. And if I don't feel good, I can just call the doctor at the clinic and they'll see me.
Okay, well, let's just reverse the tables a little here. Let's just say if someone lived in a part of the world where they didn't have access to that kind of post-COVID-19 support clinic, how much of a difference do you think that would make, considering the journey you've had?
So the thing is, I know that, listen, so Nick, when you feel sick for 5 months, or I'm telling you, if you weren't a doctor and I say, well, I got the virus and I still feel sick, you would think I was crazy, right? In the beginning, I was like, this can't be. Like after the first month, I was like, I'm going crazy. This is not right. There's something wrong. But they give you that opportunity to feel like you're not crazy. So for those people who don't have these clinics to go to ensure themselves that they're not crazy, just know that you're not crazy. And this is a real thing that people are going through right now. This virus is really bad and it could really mess with your entire body. And you're not crazy, so just rest and, take your Tylenol, your vitamins, and you'll be okay.
It's important to say that, as you say, that there is this difficulty in society for many people to really understand the potential impact that this virus can have. There is no doubt that everyone responds differently, but for some of us, that can be monumental life changes. And I think you're right. I think there needs to be more awareness so that many people in society understand that this isn't just for some people at least, it's not a virus that comes and goes. There are long-term considerations. And I also think in the medical community, it's obviously will vary around the world, but I think there is a real need, a pressing need to continue to grow our understanding of this and also our respect for patients like yourself who don't just get better within a couple of days. And there are many. And I think we have a long way to go as clinicians to really latch onto that and work with that concept. It's going to take time. This has all happened very recently, but I guess that's part of the reason we're here today, having this video experience. Any other words? Any words of any thoughts for your family, or any thoughts for others out there? Please do share any final thoughts for us.
Again, just if you're still suffering from this, just take one day at a time and try your best to overcome, the struggle for the day. And that's the advice that I would give. It's never in a million years did I think that I would get it, number one. And number two, that it would last for 5 months. 5 months of not feeling well. Of course, one would think that they were like going crazy a little bit, but thank you to all the help that I've gotten, to get through, and just one day at a time, one day at a time.
Wise words indeed, and we're so grateful for you having the courage to share your story here today. Thank you, Celeste.
You're
We
welcome.
wish you very, very well. Personally, I hope that your symptoms really do continue to improve. I'm glad you've got the support. Do send my finest regards to your family, because they have been instrumental in this journey. So I thank you, and I thank them as well.
Thank you.